Wednesdays in the wild.
Well, welcome, guys. We're so glad you're here. This is our friend Monica Bush, who we love so dearly. She's a good friend and mentor of mine. She raises 3 beautiful babies and has a great husband, and just calls Calvary home. So we're excited for her to be here for Church in the Wild. But Monica, we would love first. We're talking about this idea of Church in the Wild and what does it look like to love God in the midst of our everyday at work and with people and all of that. And so our first question really is, how did you come to the Lord? But first, would you just explain what you do and then dive into that?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. So I work at Facebook. I've worked at Facebook for almost 13 years now. And a few years ago, I helped, funnily enough, start Facebook's social marketing team. And about a year ago, when Facebook formed a company brand, where the dust settled is that I ended up on the social marketing team for the Facebook app. We call it Big Blue internally, kind of nerdy, but
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm on the social marketing team for Facebook app, and I'm a marketing manager, and I lead one of the groups in our social team called Community Advocacy and Inclusion. So I work on community management, diversity and inclusion efforts, and racial justice work.
Whoa, so cool.
That's so good. And again, you grew up at Calvary, but how did you come to know the Lord?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't feel like I grew up at Calvary because I didn't become a believer till middle school, but in many ways I did grow up because that's been over half my life now that
Totally.
I'm old. But so I always joke but mean that God has done all the important things in my life for me. And truly, my mom was talking to a friend's mom who was like, "Oh, my daughter's going to camp. Do you think Monica would want to go?" And my mom asked if I wanted to go to camp, and I said, yeah. And it was Hume. And I'd never been to church camp or anything like that before, and went and heard the gospel for the first time there this summer between 7th and 8th grade. And it all just made sense. I was like, yep, people are sinful. I had experienced that in my own life and in people around me, and I was like, yep, I definitely need a savior. And I really didn't have a lot of information, but knew that was the start of a journey. And I kind of talk about it there's a lot of puzzle pieces that then have to be built from that decision. And I think some people, a lot of the puzzle gets built really fast, and I think mine was pretty slow at first. So it was kind of a long process to understand even what that commitment was. But I feel like God really grabbed a hold of me in that week, and that's where I started my journey. That's how I came to know the Lord, summer between 7th and 8th grade.
That's so cool.
That's so cool.
Wow.
I also, just as a throwback memory for all those, to give some context, Monica was my Hume counselor in 8th grade.
What?
It was right after we had moved. I think it was my first year. It was my first year going to Hume for sure, but we had just moved to San Jose and just started at Calvary. And
no way.
Yeah,
Monica
and I'm
was
pretty
the coolest.
sure I had just graduated high school and was like, what am I doing? Why are they letting me be a counselor? And definitely got asked to show my leader badge multiple times that summer because they thought I was a high school student, not a leader.
That
which
happens
I
sometimes.
was.
Yeah, I just remember you rocked these really cool board shorts all week, and I just thought you were so cool.
They were definitely boys' board shorts. 100% bought them in the boys' department.
Yeah.
Gotta stick with the Hume rules.
Yeah, I would like
so
to think
good.
that was cool at the time, but it definitely probably wasn't. It was
I was your biggest fan, so don't worry about that.
Thank you. I'm your biggest fan, so.
Oh, stop. I love that, again, for so many reasons, I love that, Hume played a big part in your story, and then also in middle school, too. Obviously, I'm so passionate about that. As that kind of started your church experience, what role has the church really played in your life from kind of the start of your faith journey to now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a huge role. So my home life was not always easy, and especially in middle school. My parents got divorced leading into middle school, and my mom moved away to another state in 8th grade, and my brother had fallen into addiction and also got sent away. And so I met the Lord at a time that I was very lonely, and a lot of hard stuff was happening in my life. And truly the church became my family in so many ways, and still in many ways is that way. it has just been a safe place for me to grow and learn and be imperfect and experience Jesus. And then, get to kind of now also sometimes be the one who's helping be that family and that Jesus to other people. At least I hope and I pray. So I would just say, like, it's played an enormous role in my spiritual growth and my understanding of God's love for me. Also, a lot of the healing of just the hurt of life and support that you need. And so just like I've been discipled in so many ways and been loved in so many ways because of the church. And ultimately, that's just pointed me closer to Christ. It's funny, like I said, like I didn't become a believer until later. And so I think in some ways I'm glad I didn't actually know that much about church, because if I'm honest, it was kind of a weird start to me coming to Calvary. Like, I didn't know like Christians should be this or should be that. So like, I feel a little protected because in retrospect, like people I knew from school weren't particularly like going out of their way to include me when they started seeing me come to church. And my dad didn't come, and so he would drop me off and I would have to like walk home with my like Bible in a zipper case and like just like things like that. And so I think about it and I'm like, oh, I feel like God really protected me, because if I had preconceptions about what church should have been like, I might have actually not stayed. So I feel a lot of grace in that, but that also is, in many ways, I hope, and like I hope people would say this is true, like has motivated me to try to be a lot more welcoming and outgoing toward people and inclusive of people at church, because like I think that's like a really important part of church, is that like we are intentional in relationships with people and making people feel welcome and a part of something, feel a part of the family. So
That's so good. That is so true in so many ways. That is such a sweet kindness of the Lord to not have to like, deconstruct your view of church before you even start going. That's really cool. How do you feel? So again, you work at Facebook, like you mentioned. How do you see yourself really living out your faith in the wild now? Recognizing that, obviously Facebook isn't necessarily a Christian organization. What does that look like for you to live out your faith? What? What does that look like for you to live out your faith daily at work?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like he all the time gets to use me to be his hands and feet to people at work in ways that like almost feel like I definitely feel unworthy of that. And then I often think about when people will say to me like, oh, Monica, like I've never told anyone this, and then they should like share something with me, or like, no one at work knows this, and they share something, or just like I feel so this when I'm with you. I'm always like, Jesus, that is you, because I know what goes on in my heart and my mind, and like I'm just not that great, and like I just get to rejoice and like rejoice in the fact that he can be strong when I am weak all the time at work. And I see him working in these really, really cool ways where like he'll remind me of a coworker and I'll be praying for them, and then like I'll let them know, and then they'll like tell me, oh my gosh, like I needed that, like there was something happening. And I feel like all these really cool like supernatural things that are not coincidences that all happen. And but most importantly, I just think like there's just something really special about like the day-to-day and being faithful in the small things at work, and how the intentionality of like loving others in an offering of love to God, like how much he blesses that faithfulness in that. And so like my part in that is that I just ask him to use me all the time. I ask for forgiveness when I mess up. I ask him to like make them forget when I like am impatient, or all those things. And like I just feel like he's so faithful in that I can hopefully just be him all the time to my coworkers and just like love them. And there's sensitive things as a believer that come up at work, and one of the things like I feel like he's always reminding me is that like he could part the waters, so he can like make a way as a believer through this situation. And I always am asking him to just like create something new in me at work and have that like bring him glory, and for people to see him in those things. And I just feel like he does that really faithfully too. So that was a long way of saying like every day at work, I feel like it's a gift to be Jesus there. And I feel like I get blown away and humbled a lot by the ways that he chooses to work through me and in me. And like I said, I'm very humbled because I'm so far from deserving or really being usable in that way, but he like, that's when he's really strong and can shine through. So
Yeah,
That's
that's so cool. And I love that you mentioned too, even saying that while you do have this mission field at work, you also recognize that your home and your family is such a big ministry too. And you guys have been foster parents. You're not currently fostering, but have been foster parents in the past. And yeah, it's been so cool to watch you guys as a family unit minister wherever you go. And so I love the fact that even talking about it has so much to do with just showing up and being like,
yeah.
God, I offer myself to do whatever it is that you're going to do through me, recognizing that it is ultimately you who does these things. And that's so cool. For
That's
sure.
so cool. This week we're talking about like what does it look like to be like a part of the church and like your basically like, your role, but like that we're all needed. And I just love how you said like Jesus use me, like whatever you do today, like use me. And so just like thinking about these students and so badly wanting them to understand like they're so needed the same way that like, you at Facebook, like God obviously has you there and it's not you, but it's literally him in you, like meeting these people and you're so needed there. But when I think of that, if you were to bring yourself back to like Monica's student self, is there anything like what you know now of like church and church being like you in the wild, like bringing the church to Facebook? Like, is there anything that you would want our students to know, or something you want to tell your Monica student self?
yeah, I think that like God gives us passions for things, and there's like a lot to be said about just asking him how he wants to use those passions, and also asking him to just use you in the midst of the circumstances that you're in, because we don't always have control over those circumstances. So just trusting that he can use you in them. I think too, like when I think about like how hard it is to make decisions about where to go to school or what job to pursue, I also like one of the things I remind myself of often is like very few things on this earth are permanent except for our relationship with Jesus. So it's kind of hard to mess up some of these things. So like I think there's a little bit of a release of pressure in like the freedom that we have in Jesus. It's like he can use me at any school or no school. He can use me in any job or no job.
Wow.
And like having that freedom to just be like, I'm not going to mess this up because he's like way bigger than that. Like it's not possible for me to mess up his plans as long as I'm seeking him, as long as I'm walking with him. And even when I do stray, like he can make a way like through it all and back to him. And so I think there's just something in that. I think another thing, a lesson that I learned in college that I wish I had learned earlier, this isn't as related to work, but hopefully it's okay to share, is just that I think my years in high school like were really about learning some of the really basic things about faith and what it looked like. But one of the things I really missed in that was that everyone who's a believer, and even just non-believers, they're all in a different place in their walk with the Lord, and that's like okay, and that it's really not about comparing. It's about how do we all finish this race strong together, and how do we encourage one another towards that line of like, well done, good and faithful servant in front of Jesus together, and that it's not a competition of who gets there first or better. And so I think there is a lot of like sometimes hurt expectations or just like judging that happen because I just didn't really realize and appreciate that like everyone is at a different place in their walk with the Lord, and the best thing I can do is just continue to keep my eyes focused on him and help spur others toward him and not worry about me versus them, or like, you know, the letdown of thinking that somebody is in one place and realizing that they're not, and instead just being like, let's like work at this together to all get to this finish line together.
We are so thankful. Thanks for being willing to talk to us. And I again, this is such a cool example of you being church in the wild. Like I said, you and Danny are people who you don't just have like church lives and other lives, but there's no distinction between church life and other life for you guys. And so we really respect you, and we so appreciate that you're willing to come do this and talk to us today.